Ladies and gentlemen, discipline isn't about rigidity or perfectionism. It's about making choices that align with our values, even when it's uncomfortable or challenging. I've come to believe that discipline isn't a heavy hand or a cold, calculated plan. It's not about beating ourselves into submission or endlessly sacrificing joy in the name of achievement. True discipline, at its core, is an act of self-respect and a commitment to what matters most. For many of us, the word discipline carries baggage memories of rules, consequences, and failures to measure up. But what if we redefine discipline? What if, instead of punishment, discipline became synonymous with a promise to show up not perfectly, but consistently? A promise to choose courage over comfort and connection over complacency. When we practice discipline, we choose to honor our own journey. We decide that our dreams, our goals, and our commitments are worthy of the energy and effort it takes to nurture them. We aren't striving for flawlessness, we're striving for growth, for integrity, for a life that reflects our deepest values. Discipline often looks like small, unglamorous choices. It's setting boundaries, even when it's hard. It's saying no to what doesn't serve us, even when it's tempting. It's picking ourselves up when we stumble, showing ourselves compassion, and recommitting to the path we've chosen. And discipline is deeply intertwined with vulnerability. Why? Because discipline isn't about willpower, it's about self-trust. It's believing we're worthy of the effort. It's choosing to stay true to ourselves, especially when the easy choice is to quit. Vulnerability asks us to trust the process, even when we can't yet see the results. It asks us to keep going, not with a guarantee of success, but with a belief in our resilience. When we view discipline through this lens, it becomes a gift, not a burden. It's not a punishment for our past mistakes, but a pathway to our future growth. It's about choosing to step forward with purpose, even in the face of fear or self-doubt. In truth, discipline is a form of power. Not power over others, but power within ourselves, the power to choose our response, to commit to our purpose, to lean into our values, even when it's messy or uncertain. It's the power to honor our word, to be the kind of people who show up for what matters, even when it's hard. Discipline is often misunderstood as a form of rigidity or strictness, leading us to believe it's about imposing strict rules or pushing ourselves relentlessly toward perfection. Many people associate discipline with controlling every aspect of their lives, avoiding any deviation from their plans, and maintaining a constant state of vigilance to stay on track. But this traditional view can be limiting and counterproductive. When discipline is defined this way, it can become exhausting and lead to feelings of inadequacy or shame if we fall short of these self-imposed standards. True discipline is not about rigidity or a relentless pursuit of flawlessness. It's about creating a life aligned with our values and choosing to honor what is most important to us. It's a commitment to taking actions that reflect who we are and what we stand for, even when those actions are uncomfortable or difficult. It's about making deliberate choices, not as a way of avoiding mistakes, but as a way of living authentically. Discipline, in this sense, becomes a practice of aligning our actions with our values consistently, day by day, moment by moment. Living with discipline means making choices that reflect our priorities, regardless of the obstacles we face. It's easy to make decisions when everything is going smoothly or when we feel inspired and motivated. But real discipline shows up when motivation fades or when life becomes complicated. It's about choosing the harder, more meaningful path over the easy one. It's being willing to stay committed to what we believe in, even when it would be more convenient to let things slide or make excuses. This requires a shift in perspective from seeing discipline as a rigid structure to seeing it as a flexible, value-based practice. When we approach discipline this way, it becomes less about perfection and more about intention. Instead of using discipline to avoid mistakes or failures, we use it to stay grounded in our values and to stay connected with what matters to us. This kind of discipline allows us to embrace our imperfections, knowing that showing up consistently rather than perfectly is what ultimately shapes our lives. It's not about doing everything right, it's about doing the right things for the right reasons, and accepting that this will look different on different days. This shift from rigidity to alignment creates a sense of freedom within discipline. When we operate from a place of values rather than rules, we are more adaptable and resilient in the face of challenges. Discipline becomes a source of empowerment rather than a source of stress. It helps us stay connected to our goals and dreams without the weight of unrealistic expectations or the pressure of needing to control every outcome. It allows us to be human, to embrace our vulnerabilities, and to continue moving forward, even when things don't go according to plan. Choosing discipline in this way means allowing ourselves grace and compassion, understanding that setbacks and deviations are part of the journey. It's recognizing that discipline is not about punishing ourselves for falling short, but about gently guiding ourselves back to the path that feels most authentic. It's about being firm in our commitment to what matters while being kind to ourselves when life inevitably throws us off balance. When we stop seeing discipline as rigidity, we open up space for creativity, growth, and genuine connection with our purpose. Ultimately, by redefining discipline as an alignment with our values, we can release the need for perfection and instead embrace a more authentic, wholehearted approach to living. Discipline becomes less of a burden and more of an invitation to consistently choose courage, connection, and authenticity, even in the smallest moments of our daily lives. Through this lens, discipline is no longer about control or striving for flawlessness. It's about showing up with intention and honoring the person we're working to become. Discipline, when viewed through a traditional lens, often carries the connotation of punishment or restriction, a rigid framework that demands we adhere to strict guidelines. However, true discipline is much more than that. It's not about punishing ourselves for mistakes or forcing ourselves into a mold of perfection. Instead, it can be understood as a promise, a commitment we make to ourselves to show up for what really matters. This perspective shifts discipline from a heavy-handed demand to a practice of self-respect, of valuing our own journey enough to stay dedicated to the choices that align with our values and priorities. When we see discipline as a promise, it transforms into an act of self-compassion and courage. It's easy to fall into the habit of dismissing our own needs or pushing our desires to the side, especially when life becomes demanding. We might find ourselves overwhelmed with responsibilities, navigating unexpected challenges, or feeling pressure to meet external expectations. But discipline as a promise invites us to view commitment not as a burden, but as a reminder of our own worthiness, a declaration that what we care about and what we aspire to is worth the effort it takes to pursue. In this sense, discipline is not about imposing a strict plan or following a rigid set of rules. It's about making conscious choices to stay true to our values and goals. It's being willing to commit, even when the process is messy and uncertain. Often, these choices aren't dramatic gestures, but small, everyday actions that build on each other. It's choosing to write one more page when we're tired, to show up for a friend when we'd rather stay home, or to take the time for self-care when everything else feels urgent. These seemingly minor decisions reflect our commitment to living authentically and honoring the promises we've made to ourselves. This shift in understanding discipline as a promise is significant because it changes the narrative from obligation to intention. Rather than forcing ourselves to do something out of a sense of duty or fear of failure, we embrace discipline as a way of nurturing our aspirations and well-being. It's not about relentlessly pushing ourselves, but about staying connected to our purpose and believing that we're worthy of the effort required to reach our goals. This perspective creates a more sustainable, compassionate form of discipline that prioritizes growth over perfection and authenticity over rigid control. Making this promise to ourselves also requires vulnerability. It involves acknowledging that we won't always feel motivated or inspired, and there will be days when we want to abandon our commitments in favor of short-term comfort or convenience. But discipline as a promise invites us to approach these moments with understanding rather than harshness. It's not about berating ourselves for wanting to quit or for struggling to stay consistent. It's about gently but firmly guiding ourselves back to what we value, even when the path isn't easy or clear. This type of discipline is inherently flexible and adaptable. It doesn't demand that we follow a strict schedule or meet every benchmark perfectly. Instead, it calls us to be intentional in our actions and to keep returning to what matters, even when it requires effort and perseverance. It's about trusting that each choice, no matter how small, moves us closer to the person we want to become and the life we want to create. It's knowing that discipline, in this context, is not a tool for controlling ourselves, but a practice of honoring the journey we're on. By redefining discipline as a promise, we shift the focus from outcomes to actions and from perfection to presence. We prioritize our well-being and purpose, recognizing that consistency, not perfection, is what ultimately leads to growth and fulfillment. This shift empowers us to view discipline not as a strict adherence to rules, but as an ongoing commitment to ourselves, a commitment that reflects both our courage and our compassion. When we honor this promise, we give ourselves the freedom to grow, the grace to be imperfect, and the courage to stay true to what matters most, even when the path isn't easy. Honoring our journey through discipline involves recognizing the significance of our goals and dreams and understanding that they are worthy of the energy, time, and dedication required to nurture them. This idea challenges the common misconception that discipline is about relentless sacrifice or self-denial. Instead, it reframes discipline as an act of self-respect, where we acknowledge the importance of our aspirations and the unique path we are on. It is a commitment to ourselves that reflects our belief in our potential and the value of what we're working towards. Often, people struggle with discipline because they perceive it as an obligation or an expectation imposed by others or society. However, when discipline is rooted in the idea of honoring our journey, it shifts from being something external that we're supposed to do to something deeply personal that we choose to do. It's a commitment to the vision we have for our lives and the person we want to become. This makes discipline a form of self-investment rather than self-sacrifice. It becomes about respecting the journey we're on and recognizing that our dreams and goals are deserving of the effort it takes to realize them. This perspective helps us stay connected to our purpose, especially during moments of self-doubt or difficulty. When we understand that discipline is about honoring our journey, we can approach setbacks and challenges with resilience rather than harshness. Instead of seeing obstacles as evidence of inadequacy or failure, we can view them as opportunities to reaffirm our commitment to our growth and development. Discipline in this context doesn't demand that we have all the answers or get everything right. Rather, it invites us to stay engaged with our journey, even when it's difficult or unclear, because we believe in its significance. Honoring our journey also means recognizing that the path to achieving our goals isn't always linear or predictable. There will be moments of progress and setbacks, clarity and confusion. In these moments, discipline serves as a compass that keeps us grounded in our values and intentions. It's the practice of staying aligned with what matters, even when external circumstances change or our motivation wavers. It's about being willing to continue moving forward with patience and persistence, trusting that each step, no matter how small, contributes to the larger vision we have for ourselves. At its core, this kind of discipline is an expression of self-trust. It requires believing that our journey is worth investing in, even when it feels uncertain or overwhelming. It's about showing up for ourselves and our aspirations, not because we're chasing perfection or validation, but because we genuinely value the direction we're headed. This type of discipline invites us to embrace the process rather than fixating solely on the outcome. It encourages us to find meaning in the effort we put forth and to take pride in the commitment we demonstrate to ourselves and our goals. When we honor our journey through discipline, we acknowledge that the things we aspire to achieve are not just fleeting desires or passing ambitions, they are reflections of our deepest values and longings. This perspective helps us stay motivated and engaged even during the inevitable moments of fatigue or discouragement. Discipline, in this sense, is about being loyal to our dreams and respecting our own journey enough to keep showing up, especially when it's challenging. It's about recognizing that our goals and dreams deserve the effort it takes to bring them to life, and that this effort is a way of expressing our belief in ourselves and our potential. This approach to discipline allows us to cultivate a more compassionate and sustainable relationship with our aspirations. Rather than pushing ourselves to the brink or demanding perfection, we learn to appreciate the significance of each step we take toward our goals. We begin to see discipline as a form of self-care, where we prioritize what truly matters and let go of distractions or habits that don't serve our purpose. It's about choosing to be intentional in our actions and decisions, not out of obligation, but out of a genuine desire to honor the unique journey we're on. Discipline becomes an ongoing practice of self-commitment and self-respect. It's not about forcing ourselves to meet external expectations or measuring our worth by our accomplishments. Instead, it's about valuing our journey enough to stay dedicated to what truly matters, even when the road is uncertain or difficult. This perspective allows us to approach discipline with a sense of purpose and meaning, recognizing that each choice we make is an opportunity to honor the person we are becoming and the life we are creating. Discipline and vulnerability are often seen as contrasting forces. Discipline is frequently portrayed as strength and resilience, while vulnerability is perceived as softness or weakness. Yet the reality is that these two are deeply interconnected, and true discipline cannot thrive without an element of vulnerability. This is because at its heart, discipline is not about sheer willpower or force, it's about self-trust. It involves believing in ourselves enough to stay committed to our journey, especially when it feels uncomfortable, uncertain, or daunting. Vulnerability in the context of discipline means allowing ourselves to be open to the challenges and discomfort that come with growth. It's about acknowledging that pursuing our goals requires facing uncertainty and embracing the possibility of failure or setbacks. When we practice discipline, we are not just pushing through resistance, we are choosing to confront the unknown with courage. This requires a willingness to be vulnerable, to risk making mistakes, to struggle, and to learn from those experiences. It's a recognition that discipline isn't about avoiding failure, but about having the courage to keep trying, even when success isn't guaranteed. Self-trust plays a crucial role here. Discipline, in its most authentic form, is a way of showing that we believe in our capacity to handle whatever comes our way. It's an expression of confidence in our ability to navigate difficulties, setbacks, and the unexpected twists of life. However, this self-trust doesn't mean we are free from fear or doubt. In fact, trusting ourselves often involves acknowledging our fears and uncertainties and choosing to move forward despite them. This act of moving forward requires vulnerability because it means putting ourselves out there without knowing if things will work out. When we embrace vulnerability within discipline, we open ourselves up to growth in a deeper way. We accept that we won't always feel confident or strong, and that discipline isn't about pretending to have it all figured out. Instead, it's about acknowledging our insecurities and imperfections while still choosing to act in alignment with our values and goals. This willingness to embrace vulnerability allows us to be more resilient in the face of challenges. It creates space for self-compassion, where we can acknowledge the difficulty of the journey without harshly judging ourselves for not being perfect. Another aspect of vulnerability within discipline is the courage to acknowledge when we need support or rest. It's easy to associate discipline with pushing ourselves to the limit, but genuine discipline requires a deep understanding of our limits and the humility to recognize when we need help. This can be one of the most vulnerable acts, admitting that we cannot do everything on our own and that asking for support does not diminish our worth or our commitment to our goals. It's about being honest with ourselves about what we need to sustain our efforts in the long run. Vulnerability within discipline is not about weakness, it's about authenticity. It's about being real with ourselves about where we are in our journey, what we need to keep moving forward, and what fears or doubts we must face. When we trust ourselves enough to show up fully, even with our imperfections and uncertainties, we cultivate a more sustainable and compassionate form of discipline. This kind of discipline isn't driven by a desire to prove something to others or to attain an illusion of perfection. It's driven by a genuine commitment to our growth and well-being, a recognition that the path to our goals is a process that involves both strength and tenderness. When we embrace vulnerability, we allow ourselves to let go of rigid expectations and be more open to learning and growth. Vulnerability helps us approach discipline with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of harshly critiquing ourselves for not meeting a specific standard, we become more interested in understanding why we face difficulties and how we can adapt or improve. This openness makes discipline a more flexible and adaptive practice, where setbacks and mistakes become valuable lessons rather than reasons for self-criticism. Vulnerability allows us to stay present in the process of discipline. It encourages us to be honest about our experiences and emotions, to acknowledge the challenges, and to celebrate the small victories along the way. By intertwining discipline with vulnerability, we transform it from a rigid set of expectations into a dynamic practice of self-trust, authenticity, and growth. It becomes less about forcing ourselves to achieve and more about choosing to show up consistently for what matters, knowing that we are strong enough to handle both the challenges and the uncertainties of our journey. Discipline is often thought of as requiring grand acts of willpower or significant sacrifices, but the reality is that true discipline is built on small, unglamorous choices made consistently over time. These are the decisions that, in isolation, may seem insignificant or even mundane, but collectively they shape the trajectory of our lives. It's these small, everyday actions that reflect our commitment to what matters and demonstrate our willingness to prioritize long-term values over short-term comfort. For many of us, the concept of discipline can feel overwhelming, especially if we equate it with drastic lifestyle changes or rigid rules. But discipline doesn't have to be about heroic efforts or dramatic gestures. In fact, the most impactful discipline often manifests in the form of small choices that align with our purpose and goals. These are the moments when we decide to wake up a bit earlier to work on a passion project, to choose a healthier meal even when it's inconvenient, or to take a deep breath and respond thoughtfully, rather than reacting impulsively. These small decisions may seem unimportant in the moment, but over time, they add up. This is because discipline is not a one-time effort, it's a continuous practice. The choices we make on a daily basis compound and eventually shape who we become. While it's easy to underestimate the power of these small actions, they are the true indicators of our commitment. They reveal our dedication to showing up for what we value, even when it's not exciting or visible to others. Discipline in these moments isn't about glory, it's about persistence. What makes these small choices so powerful is their consistency. A single act of discipline, while valuable, is not what creates lasting change. Instead, it's the steady, repeated commitment to making those small choices that gradually transforms our habits and behaviors. It's the cumulative effect of choosing to honor our priorities each day, even in the face of distractions or discomfort. This consistency helps to build a sense of trust within ourselves, trust that we can rely on ourselves to follow through and stay committed to our path. These small choices also require a significant amount of self-awareness. To consistently make choices that align with our values, we need to be clear about what those values are. This means taking the time to reflect on what truly matters to us and being honest about our motivations. Once we understand our values, we can use them as a guide when making decisions, especially when faced with tempting shortcuts or easier alternatives. By keeping our values at the forefront, we can navigate the complexities of daily life with a clearer sense of direction. Another key aspect of these small choices is that they often involve setting boundaries. Discipline isn't just about saying yes to the things that align with our goals, it's also about having the courage to say no to what doesn't serve us. This can mean declining invitations that distract us from our purpose, resisting habits that undermine our well-being, or limiting the time we spend on activities that don't contribute to our growth. Setting boundaries can be challenging, especially when it involves disappointing others or stepping away from comfortable patterns. However, These small acts of saying no are essential in creating the space we need to focus on what truly matters. The simplicity of these small, everyday choices can make them easy to overlook or dismiss. After all, choosing to read for 15 minutes instead of scrolling through social media, or opting for a quick walk instead of staying glued to a screen may not seem transformative. But these choices represent moments of discipline in which we actively choose to prioritize our values and long-term goals over immediate gratification. This repeated practice of aligning our actions with our intentions strengthens our discipline over time and allows us to gradually build the life we envision. Small choices are often where the hardest work of discipline lies. It's relatively easy to commit to big resolutions or dramatic changes in moments of motivation, but maintaining discipline in the small, ordinary decisions is much more challenging. These choices test our resolve and invite us to stay connected to our values, even when no one is watching or when the rewards aren't immediately visible. It's in these small moments that we cultivate resilience and integrity, proving to ourselves that we can stay the course, even when the path isn't glamorous or easy. Discipline is about making the small, unglamorous choices that align with our purpose and values, even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. It's not about perfection, but about persistence and intentionality. By focusing on these everyday decisions, we create a life that reflects our deepest commitments and priorities, one small choice at a time. At its core is an internal source of power. It's not just about external achievements or visible progress, but about cultivating a deep sense of strength from within. This form of internal power comes from our ability to honor our commitments, to lean into our values, and to consistently make choices that align with the life we want to create. When we approach discipline this way, it becomes less about control or force and more about fostering a sense of agency over our own actions and decisions. It's a practice of choosing purpose over fear or self-doubt. One of the most powerful aspects of discipline is its ability to connect us with our inner strength and resilience. When we practice discipline, we are essentially affirming that we have the ability to make intentional choices in the face of challenges or temptations. This sense of intentionality is what gives discipline its power. It's not about adhering to a rigid set of rules or punishing ourselves for mistakes. Instead, it's about consistently choosing to act in ways that reflect our purpose, even when it's difficult or uncomfortable. This internal power comes from the knowledge that, while we may not have control over external circumstances, we have control over how we choose to respond. Discipline is about recognizing this agency and using it to make decisions that align with our values. It's an acknowledgement that our actions are within our control, and that we have the ability to influence the direction of our lives, even when we face uncertainty or obstacles. This awareness fosters a sense of empowerment, where we are no longer passive observers of our own lives, but active participants in shaping our path. Another crucial element of this internal power is the sense of self-trust that discipline cultivates. When we consistently choose to honor our commitments, we build trust in ourselves and our ability to follow through. This self-trust is foundational to discipline because it reinforces the belief that we are capable of navigating difficulties and achieving our goals. Over time, this creates a cycle where each act of discipline strengthens our confidence, which in turn makes it easier to stay committed in the future. This internal sense of trust allows us to face challenges with resilience, knowing that we have the capacity to keep moving forward. Discipline also involves a degree of self-compassion, which may seem counterintuitive. Many people associate discipline with harshness or strict self-criticism, but true discipline requires a kind and understanding approach to ourselves. It's about recognizing that we won't always be perfect, that setbacks and mistakes are a natural part of the journey, and that our value isn't defined by how flawlessly we execute our plans. By practicing self-compassion within discipline, we can maintain our sense of power without falling into the trap of self-judgment or shame. This allows us to be more flexible and adaptable, responding to challenges with creativity rather than rigidity. Another dimension of this internal power is the courage to choose purpose over fear. Fear often manifests as self-doubt, procrastination, or avoidance, and it can be a powerful force that keeps us from pursuing what matters to us. Discipline, however, invites us to acknowledge this fear without letting it dictate our actions. It's about choosing to act in alignment with our purpose, even when fear is present. This requires courage, but it's a courage that grows stronger each time we choose to honor our commitments despite the discomfort or uncertainty. Discipline as an internal power also means that we are not solely motivated by external validation or recognition. While external achievements can be satisfying, true discipline is driven by an intrinsic sense of purpose and a desire to stay true to our values. This shift from external to internal motivation allows us to maintain discipline, even when external rewards are delayed or absent. It gives us the resilience to keep going, not because we're chasing recognition, but because we believe in the value of what we're working toward. This internal motivation is what sustains us in the long run, helping us stay committed even when the journey feels challenging or the results are not immediate. This internal power isn't just about achieving specific goals, it's about the person we become through the practice of discipline. It's about developing a sense of integrity, where our actions align with our values and where we can look back on our efforts with a sense of pride and fulfillment. This form of discipline allows us to build a life that is authentic and meaningful, not because it's free of challenges, but because we've consistently chosen to show up for what matters. Discipline as an internal power is about taking ownership of our choices, building self-trust, practicing self-compassion, and having the courage to stay true to our purpose. It's a practice of intentionally aligning our actions with our values and trusting that each small step we take contributes to the larger vision we have for our lives. This sense of internal power is what allows discipline to become a source of strength and resilience, helping us navigate the uncertainties of life with a clear sense of purpose and direction. Discipline is not a rigid set of rules or a pursuit of perfection. It's an ongoing practice of aligning our actions with what matters most to us. It's about making small, intentional choices that reflect our values, embracing vulnerability in the face of uncertainty, and trusting ourselves to stay committed even when the path is difficult. True discipline is not about controlling or forcing ourselves, but about honoring our journey, recognizing our power, and showing up with consistency and compassion. It's the quiet strength that keeps us grounded and the courage that helps us grow. Discipline, then, is not just a means to an end, but a way of living that empowers us to create a life that is authentic, fulfilling, and true to who we are. Thank you.